Previously on Dark Side of the Ring.
Sure, you can watch the Hollywood Blondes, and we could have been a great tag team if we'd been left together. But if you can watch Flying Brian in his total element, being the loose cannon, you're seeing one of the true, really, really bright minds in the business of professional wrestling.
What the are you doing? Easy!
He was on track to becoming the biggest star in wrestling by convincing people that he was the only one that wouldn't do what he was told.
I have been fired by Eric Bischoff!
Brian and I talked about it. I can't give you what you want. Raise the value in your stock so that when you come back, it'll give me the ability to pay you more because you've raised your own value.
Brian Pillman masterminded a cutting-edge character the wrestling world had never seen. Playing the system at its own game, he single-handedly turned the industry on its head in order to manipulate his way to the top.
If he'd play one side against the other in the middle of the burgeoning wrestling war, then he would come out much better, 6 figures per year better.
But did he want it for himself? He didn't care about himself. He cared about those little kids.
Lost inside his manic performance art, Brian's real life spirals out of control.
He was dependent on to provide for several different mothers and families, and I think that does weigh on a man.
A tragic turn of events would not only alter the course of Brian's career indefinitely, but also the lives of those closest to him.
I really believe that if it was not for the Humvee wreck, that everything would have turned out differently.
Melanie called me, and she called to tell me that Brian had an accident, and it was bad. And he was airlifted to University Hospital and was in the emergency room. So I was the lucky one to go to the hospital. And I thought, oh, Jesus, here we go again.
When I got to the hospital, I walked right by the room. And then Linda's like, that's his room, Melanie. I'm like, that's not my husband. She's like, I know, it doesn't look like him, does it?
Because his hair was red with all the blood, and they hit him in a neck brace. I mean, his head was swelled up like a beach ball. And I thought, oh my God.
It was really bad. His eyes were red, like, I didn't see any color than red, like blood. His eyes were just, ugh.
He had 6 different doctors for his face. There's one that just does the forehead, the lower mandible, the upper mandible, the nose, the eye sockets. Everything in his face was shattered. They had to put plates in his face, and they peeled his scalp back to make the incision and peeled his face down to put the plates in.
Word travels quickly that Brian has been in a terrible car accident, and there's talk of him losing a foot.
His ankle was shattered. In fact, the nurse told me that it was just like hanging off the table. She had to pick it up to put it back on the table. And then the doctor said, that they would have to just fuse it into a walking position, that he wouldn't probably be able to run or even wrestle again.
I'd show up, and he goes, I said, don't talk, Brian, it's all right. Hey, I'm with you, I'm thinking, I don't know. And he's got a titanium mask, and he's got things holding his legs together.
And once he kind of gained consciousness, what was his reaction to the accident?
I remember him crying in the hospital, just saying, I really messed up. I really messed up. Because he thought, his career was over. And I said, just be grateful you were by yourself. There was no kids in the car. It'll be fine. But he was crying, saying, I really messed up.
So, to the best of your knowledge, what took place with the accident? What happened? What happened to Brian?
Oh, he fell asleep at the wheel. He had been up, and he went and picked up some of his medication, and I guess it hit him too soon before he got back to the house. And yeah, he just drove into a into a tree trunk off to the side and it threw the Humvee, totaled the Humvee.
Was there also maybe, like, was there substance issues with him at the time too?
No, just those muscle relaxers. Maybe a few pain pills.
Well, we are turning the microphone over to you, sir. We don't need any police reports or doctor reports. Can you tell us in your own words what happened?
70 miles per hour, and I instantly became Evel Knievel.
Oh, gee.
Shot up in the air, then proceeded to come straight down, nose first, and luckily for me, I didn't have a seatbelt on because it shot me straight out, and I pierced the convertible top of that vehicle with my head like a bullet. Was shot out 50 feet away from the vehicle. It ended up doing 2 end-over-end flips.
Oh, my Lord.
When he came home from the hospital, I do remember him being in the living room, and I had a gift, and I wanted to give it to him. And I was just terrified because I'm like, that's not my dad. I don't know who that is. You know, as a child and seeing my father like that, I think it just kind of freaked me out a little bit.
I do have some small memories there of just seeing those bolts and how they're just screwed into his leg. And I'm thinking, what's going on here, you know? And it's like, they look like they're greased up, but it's like, and not grease, but it's like blood and like just, it's all hardened and it's just, oh, it was just a wild sight to see, you know, just some rusty bolts sticking out of your dad's leg.
But yeah, I really remember him just being like so exhausted and run down. I was just too young to really understand like what was really going on with him and like how ragged his life had become.
The loose cannon thing had gone so far at this point that a lot of the guys were convinced there was no wreck and it was Brian working again. And they're just trying to figure out what the angle is. How does he expect to get more money out of this or more attention out of this? Or, you know, was it really a wreck? Or maybe he just ran his car off the road and wrecked it to get, you know, publicity. He had created so much, not only mystery, but confusion about himself that even the guys that were his friends weren't exactly sure how to take him.
Perhaps he would have done that for attention. And then Kim, who would not work me, Kim is just like, no, it's real. And I told people, it's real. And then, you know, I think most people didn't believe me either. He was, you know, there's the Andy Kaufman thing in him. Faking an auto accident, perhaps he would have done that for attention.
There was even at one point a rumor that some of the wrestlers put out that he was having plastic surgery to look just like Shawn Michaels so he could go into the World Wrestling Federation and be the evil Shawn Michaels and fight him for the title. Guys believed that because they thought Brian was nuts.
While the wrestling rumor mill is speculating the authenticity of the accident, media outlets also question Brian's intentions.
Brian, now you're not having plastic surgery and, you know, gonna go into the WWF as Shawn Michaels' twin or something. I don't know what goes on America Online.
Think about that statement.
It's preposterous, but just...
Right now, I am the owner of 4 steel titanium plates bolted to my face to hold everything together. I look like Brian effing Pillman with a swollen face and black eyes.
I can look back and Brian was pretty honest with me most of the time, but the one where I know that he wasn't was right after the accident. And Brian, you know, said like, oh yeah, the doctors told me, you know, it's like, it's gonna take a while, but I will be 100%. The doctors have told me, and I know that the doctors told him the exact opposite.
The wreck happened during the negotiations. He kept it pretty quiet how badly he was hurt. And if the real story of that wreck had come out at that point, I don't think he would have got a contract from either company. He could never again do physically what he had been able to do before. And he didn't want anybody to know that.
The object was to play Vince for money. And he did, only he was near dead when he did. Vince signed him, and he signed him for more money.
Vince McMahon offers Brian a guaranteed 3-year contract. And although Eric Bischoff offers him more money, his deal is subject to be renegotiated every 3 months.
Brian knew at that point, because of the extent of the injury, that if he had an out clause in a contract, that at some point fairly early, it was going to get exercised.
The events that have taken place in my life just in the past 8 weeks have really changed the future of my life. And from going from a point not knowing if I was going to live or not, to standing here, signing a contract with the World Wrestling Federation, it's a dream come true.
What changed about Brian coming into our company at that time? Well, he's not going to be able to wrestle to any degree or even comparably to what he was.
Although Brian is still in rehabilitation for his injuries, he officially joins the WWF in 1996 with the loose cannon persona already in full force.
There's Brian Pillman. What's he doing here? Brian Pillman, recently signing with the World Wrestling Federation.
I just remember him coming in, and I was like, okay, let's see what he can do here in the land of, WWF. They'll let you go out there and push the envelope, but, how strong is he? Can he do it? And I would have, if I was going to bet on Brian, I was like, oh, yeah. If he could just get healed up, he's going to go right to the top.
I'm gonna rape, pillage, and plunder this entire federation!
When Brian came home, he still had an IV. And he unhooked himself from the IV, go do the show, and then come back and hook himself back up again. He had to do that because of work. So then it wasn't fun for him anymore. I don't think he enjoyed it anymore.
That was what I consider the beginning of the end.
As Brian Pillman continues to struggle with his crippling injuries, an upcoming surgery keeps him out of any in-ring action. To disguise this from fans, the WWF devises a shocking storyline involving his old tag team partner.
I needed to do something to get some heat. We were in Cincinnati, in his hometown, so it's always great to attack somebody in their hometown, especially him being in a compromised position.
Steve and Brian were still friends, and they still wanted to see each other succeed. Steve was still on his way up, so we decided to put them together because we thought that they would enjoy it, and at the same time, the people would enjoy it as well.
Hey, wait a minute! What a cheap shot by...
I laid into him and started kicking the hell out of him. I broke that cane on his ankle. That brass duck head flew into the crowd. I stomped a mud hole in his ass and walked it dry. That was a stiff beating I gave him because it had to be. My character was a vicious, cold-blooded guy who was ruthless and remorseless. So had I not given him the beating that I gave him, who would have cared? They cared about Brian because I hurt his ass.
He may have re-broken Pillman's ankle here.
He gets Brian Pillman down and he puts a metal folding chair around the bad ankle and then stomps the seat of the chair.
Oh my God!
And Brian screams, oh my God, he's re-injured the ankle. Here's the way you can do that. I won't give away any secrets. But that was an excuse for Brian to have continued problems with the ankle publicly on television. It became in the industry known as Pillmanizing a body part.
Brian took that ass whooping like a damn man. He knew what I had to do, and he sold it like $1 million.
In the midst of a TV ratings war with WCW, Vince strives to produce edgier content to further capitalize on the feud between Pillman and Austin.
Somehow they decided, and I was not consulted on this, but they decided that it would be a wonderful thing if they did a remote from Brian Pillman's house in Cincinnati.
We are live. Austin is outside of Brian Pillman's home.
Steve Austin came to find him and stage a home invasion on Monday Night Raw.
Austin trying to get into the house of Brian Pillman.
Were you excited to do something that felt so real and gritty at that time?
I always want to do something that feels real and gritty, especially something that's going to have the volume turned up, the testosterone, the adrenaline turned up. I mean, hell, man, if you're just casually, if you're not a wrestling fan and you're kind of just flipping channels and all of a sudden you watch this 10 seconds of this scene, you're not going to change the channel.
Steve is a dead man walking because when Austin 316 meets Pillman, 9mm gun,
Oh my God.
I'm going to blast his short ass straight to hell.
All of a sudden, man, I start bashing in that window with that aluminum baseball bat.
What the hell is that?
And there's metal energy shrieking.
It's Austin.
I remember Vince was like, all right, we're going to have a Stone Cold, and y'all just wing it from there.
Nothing like that had ever been done before in wrestling. It was kind of groundbreaking, whether it was in a good way or a bad way. People weren't ready for it. They weren't ready for it. The reaction was pretty negative to it. I mean, it was pretty darn negative. I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of, like, using a gun, and it seemed going really extreme, but that's the direction wrestling went.
Oh my God, he's back!
That's Brian. I don't know whose idea it was and how much input he had on the idea. He never really told me that, but he was absolutely really into it. And they had to apologize for it the next week because the gun thing, Vince had to actually go on television and apologize for that angle because it got so much negativity.
And on behalf of the World Wrestling Federation, for those of you who were offended, those viewers, we humbly apologize for the incident that took place last Monday night on Raw.
And I think that's the only angle Vince ever apologized for.
Join us here at ringside.
While still recovering from the car wreck, Pillman is temporarily sidelined as a broadcast announcer.
Yeah, I'm going to cut through all your duplicit rhetoric and cut right to the chase. Tell them like it is. And hey, if the censors don't like it, you're going to get fired. Not me. I'm Brian Pillman. I'll just go somewhere else and feed people up.
He looked at being an announcer as a come down. It was less than. It's not being a man. When I said, look, you can make a great living, you can take care of your health, he didn't want to hear it. Only thing he wanted to hear was me to encourage him that you could come back and be what you were, or really, really close to it. And I never told him that because I've been lying.
The competitor in him wanted just to get back in the ring and work. And he was working matches, but he was in a lot of pain.
The former Cincinnati Bengal has had 2 major surgeries on his leg.
Even though he was able to sometimes have decent matches, just because he was smart enough to know how, and he would fall on his face, do things that were dangerous in a different way, but not hurt the body parts that were hurt. It was really sad to watch. He wasn't the same at all.
Brian needed to stay medicated more often than he should because of the pain he was in, because he was doing things that he shouldn't have been doing. He made it through because he'd say, oh, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm fine. He wasn't fine.
Consistently performing well beyond what his body can handle, Brian's dependency on painkillers and the pressure to provide for his family is pushing him to the point of no return. While rushing through recovery, Brian Pillman hampers any progress on his injuries by choosing to still perform in the ring, which results in his pain becoming all-consuming.
The only thing Brian ever told me was that if he had an ache or a pain, he took a pill. He said if it didn't go away, he took another one. And then he took a pill till it went away. He was sick, physically sick, with infection in his ankle because he was going to shows and not recouping it properly.
I would talk to guys in WWF, and they would tell me how he couldn't get through the airport. You know what I mean? He couldn't walk through the airport, and he's out there taking bumps in a wrestling ring. It's like he cannot walk through the airport.
I'd see him kind of walking around with his suitcase, and he wasn't moving so well. But Brian is one of those guys, and like a man's man, you just figure, whatever it is, Brian's got it. He's Brian Pillman. And I could have seen the writing on the wall, but because of the regard that I held him in, thought it was going to be just fine.
When you have wrestlers that are missing shows or obviously unable to perform when they get there, then you know you've got problems. It wasn't that obvious with Brian. And how were you able to tell where the loose cannon ended and the real person began?
How was your guys' relationship?
We had some problems. We were having problems because he kept wrecking rental cars. He was definitely like nodding out at the wheel. He was definitely having issues. He acted as though he wasn't going to be around much longer. He used to say things like, if anything happens to me, make sure you move back to Atlanta and don't stay up here if you're not comfortable here, and make sure you find somebody so the kids have a father. I'm like, why would you even say something like that? And then the next day he wrecked a rental car.
I had become a bit estranged from him because he was up. And one time he came to my house and he had a big welt. You could see the hole. It was like a, you know, the syringe, it was a horse needle syringe that went in there. And it was growth hormone or something. But he was up. He was like, he kept repeating himself. And I said, this is it, Brian. I'll give you to 10 and get the out of my house. My kids are upstairs sleeping. Don't ever come here in this state. Oh yeah, but I gotta do that. I said, no, I can't. I'm sorry. You're a friend, but get the away from me right now. And he did.
Some of his friends had come to me when I was in charge of talent relations and say that this was becoming a bigger issue and I needed to intervene. And it was going to be tough because he was not going to appreciate that intervention. I called the lead agent, and I said, you know, I'm going to have a drug tester there tonight to test Pillman. And I said, make sure it gets done. He felt like I had betrayed him. That's what he told me. I can't believe you of all people would betray me. And that you always had my back. You were always there for me. And now this. I said, Brian, I'm trying to save your life. That's all I'm trying to do.
And Brian was called me up. I hate Jim Ross. Why is he singling me out? Do you know how many guys in this company are doing drugs? And he goes, they're not gonna find anything on me, nothing but my prescription pain pills. They're not gonna find any illegal drugs in me. And in fact, you know, the only thing that they found in him was prescription pain drugs and steroids, which, you know, in an extent, you know, I don't know that that really counts for what they were looking for.
I had to lead Brian out of the path that he was on, to no avail. I failed. I needed to convince him that he's so talented that he was going to be a star in other areas of pro wrestling. I failed.
In October of 1997, at the Kiel Center in St. Louis, Missouri, Brian is scheduled to compete at WWF's pay-per-view event, Bad Blood.
In those days, the call time for talent at the pay-per-views was 1 o'clock. And sometimes guys would be late, oversleep, miss their flight, traffic, whatever. But by 5 o'clock, everybody was accounted for except for Brian. And that was egregiously late to be for a pay-per-view. So Bruce Pritchard asked me, I'm in talent relations, he said, try to find where he might be. Call the hotel where he stayed last night in Minneapolis, see what time he checked out. I get on the phone and boom, the guy answers. I said, I'm with the World Wrestling Federation. We're looking for one of our wrestlers. He stayed there last night, Brian Pillman. Can you tell me what time he checked out? And the guy said, hold on a second. And he put me on hold. And I'm like, okay, is he checking his records? And he answered, he says, sir? I said, yeah. He said, Mr. Pillman's dead. And the first flash that I had, what is Brian doing now? I said, is this a rib? And the guy said, no, the police are here now. I said, okay. So I told one of the production assistants, I said, go get Bruce. And he said, oh, Bruce is busy, he's doing that. I said, Brian is dead, go get Bruce. And Bruce came in and got on the phone, and I just kind of walked off because I did not want to hear that news right now. 23 years later, I didn't want to hear that news.
On October 5th, 1997, Brian Pillman was found dead in his hotel room in Bloomington, Minnesota. He was 35 years old.
It's hard for me to still think about it today and think of that heart of that athlete, of that performer, stopping. Just doesn't seem believable.
It almost didn't register with me because I'm like, Brian ain't dead, because he couldn't die. If you knew Brian, this force field of energy that he was, I thought could never be stopped. I honestly thought that.
State police showed up on the door and said that he had to tell me that my husband was found deceased.
As a kid already in this show business world, I was thinking, like, is this a work? Like, is he really dead? Like, no, he's surely coming back. Like, I didn't even know what to think. I didn't even cry when my dad died. And I just remember, like, my family we're all sitting on the bed, like, hugging each other and crying, and everybody's crying. And I'm looking around, I'm like, where's the camera crew? You know, they gotta be around here somewhere, you know? I was like, all right, I'll play the spot here, you know? We'll all just hug and pretend we're sad. But then, like, reality set in. I'm like, oh shit, he's really not coming home. Like, holy crap. As a kid, that's just kind of what I thought. I figured, you know what? He went to work that day and he decided to stay there.
The next night on Monday Night Raw, the news of Brian's death is broadcast live.
Yesterday afternoon, Brian Pillman was found dead in a hotel room in Bloomington, Minnesota.
I remember when we tolled the bell 10 times, that was when I got emotional. I remember very emotional, and that's when I was like, he's gone. He's gone.
And then I remember talking to, I think, Jim Ross. I said, hand the phone to Owen. And then Owen says, I don't know what happened. Then Vince got on the phone and he said, do you want to, talk on camera? And then I just thought, well, you know what? With Brian, the show must go on.
Joining us now, ladies and gentlemen, in suburban Cincinnati, the wife of Brian Pillman, Melanie Pillman. Melanie, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I did say to Vince, please don't ask me about drugs or anything like that, because I do not exactly know why he died yet.
Brian, because of his injuries, has had to take a great deal of prescribed medicine.
And the first thing he does is start talking about pain pills. And then I'm like, that's Vince, all right. I made like a really funny face. And I remember that's the only clear part of that interview I can remember thinking, wish his mother was standing here so I could smack him. Because he swore he wouldn't say anything like leading down that direction until the death certificate came out.
I think all athletes, to a degree, experience a reliance on pain medicine. And, I knew it was just a matter of time before it happened to someone. And fortunately, it was my husband. And I just want everyone to know that I hope it's a wake-up call to some of you, because it could be your husband next, or it could be you. And, you don't want to leave behind a bunch of orphans like my husband did.
I absolutely despised the grieving widow interview. I didn't like it on a wrestling program. I was uncomfortable with it. I didn't know why she had to go out there and have to answer these questions that were obviously meant to elicit tears and etc. for television, say for good television. I thought he should have sent her a check for $100,000 and kept her ass off TV, is what I thought.
Have you had any opportunity to think about what you now as a single parent will do to support your 5 children?
Vince, I don't even really know what day it is, so I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, and everybody's like, oh, that was so horrible what you did to her. I'm not doing it. But nobody pressured me into it.
I hated it. I didn't want to relive and regurgitate this matter to pop a rating. And to me, that's what it's all about.
And what was the official cause of death?
Heart disease. And see, my father died of a massive heart attack at 55.
What were your memories of his funeral?
We got there early before people came in because it was supposed to be family and friends. And when we walked in, there was a camera crew there. And I walked up to him and I said, who are you? And I said, you're not supposed to be here. They said, well, Melanie said we can. And I said, well, I'm Brian's sister and I'm telling you, no, you can't. And they left.
Did many wrestlers show up?
No. Just Vince and Jim Ross were there.
They had an open casket, and I knew then it's going to be really tough. There's the last time I saw him. That's the last time I would see Brian, lying in a casket. And that was just gut-wrenching, absolutely gut-wrenching. I just stared, and I had memories floating back when I was looking at the corpse. I'm thinking, this shouldn't be a part of my pro wrestling career. This should not be a part of my journey in this crazy business. And we shouldn't be burying a guy that's this young, and all this got a young family around him.
At the very end, everyone's gone except for, you know, a couple family members. And the little girls, they're kind of running around, and they're not like crying or anything. They're just little kids, and they go, we gotta say goodbye to Daddy, and they all run to the casket. Goodbye, Daddy, goodbye, Daddy. I was like, oh.
And I think for me, I was just in complete shock. I just, you know, I couldn't put it all together. I just couldn't believe it, because it's like I lost my mom and now my dad, you know, and I was just a lost little girl.
What do you remember from that day?
Going through the motions and pretending I was still alive and I had a soul. I just felt like I just didn't know what to do. Right now, like, it's the same day almost.
What do you mean?
I mean, I can bring myself back to that same pain in my heart. If I let it go too long, which I'm just gonna stop now, if that's okay for a second.
He had such an impact, such an influence on so many people's lives. It had to have hurt everybody to see him go. It had to have hurt everybody to lose him. But the person it hurt the most was Melanie, was my mother. She dealt with losing what was ultimately the love of her life.
After Brian is laid to rest, his children are jolted into their new reality.
I never really had a problem with Melanie until my father passed, and then, you know, like, her true character revealed itself.
I spiraled out of control. I wasn't the best mother in the world. I always loved my kids.
Up until this day, Melanie receives royalties from my father's legacy, which I have seen 0 cents.
Oh yeah, they said I was a gold digger too, and I spent all the money I ever got on crazy stuff. Some of it was spent on crazy stuff, but not the way they said.
We stayed at my dad's house for a while, and then things got really bad, and we moved, and, you know, running water would be turned off all the time, electric would be turned off. It's crazy how you go from having a silver platter growing up to not even knowing when your next meal is going to be.
It took a downward spiral. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It got worse and worse and worse and worse.
Depressed a lot, sleeping a lot, drinking too much. Brian found me passed out one time, and I almost died of alcohol poisoning. I was like 12, and found me on the floor with a bottle of vodka by my head. No kid should have to see something like that. It's craziness.
When my mother remarried and my stepfather came into the picture, there was a lot of drug abuse on the side of them, and there was a lot of neglect. My stepfather was very physically abusive with my sister and myself. I would be grounded to my room. You're grounded for the next 6 months, you know, I better not see you out of your room. He had dogs more or less trained to abuse me as well, and if I was grounded, like, these dogs would make sure I was kept in my room. Like, they would bark at me, and they would bite me, and they would physically, like, keep me in my room because of how I was verbally and physically abused by my stepdad. Like, these dogs would adopt that mentality of like, attacking me. And I was just so abused that my developing socially was very hard for me. And that's how, you know, like, nobody took me out to throw a baseball with me, you know? Like, nobody took me out to throw a football, you know? So I went to school, I didn't know how to play sports, you know? I wasn't very athletic, you know, so I couldn't catch a football, couldn't throw a baseball. But I was big into games and video games and stuff, and I had a GameCube, but eventually he caught onto that. My stepdad would catch onto that shit, he'd unplug it, you know, he'd throw it against the wall. It's like everything I ever latched onto or loved was taken away, you know, so. It was hard, it was a hard time.
While Brian Jr. and Brittany grow up with Melanie, Danielle lives with her mother. As the siblings drift apart, their Aunt Linda takes action.
At least once or twice a month, I would get them together, and so they didn't lose contact with each other.
She is literally everything. I swear, I think that she is a true angel. I don't have a mom, but she's the closest thing I have to as a mom. I can call her at any time. I mean, she took me in, you know, she bought this house so we could have a home and a family. And I don't know what I would do without her. I really don't.
They'd all come to my house. There's a spider in the bathtub upstairs. I don't kill anything. You know, I always take them outside when I find them. Brian has a deadly fear of spiders. And there's one, and I saw it this morning. I thought, oh, I'll get that later. I didn't think he'd go to the bathroom.
I love Linda to death, and she's helped the kids a lot. And I just want them to forgive me. But do I know if they will or not? I don't know.
Brian Pillman lives on in the hearts and minds of his family, but his legacy would return to the ring in a way no one would anticipate.
Brian Pillman's legacy in wrestling lives on in that he created a character that people still remember to this day because it was in large part himself.
He's a guy that overcame a lot of odds and totally kicked ass in an industry of guys that were much, larger than him. I would have loved to see what the next 10 years would have played out for him had he never had that damn car wreck.
He knew the hand that he was dealt after the accident. There wasn't a damn thing he could do about it, which killed him. Figuratively, and I think eventually, literally.
Brian's death started a domino effect that forced people to recognize the steroid issue, but put extra focus on the real cause of people dying too young, which is pills.
The only hurdle he couldn't get across was the last one, and it was his own body that had betrayed him. The biggest legacy, though, unfortunately, is what would have been, where he would have gone, what heights he would have achieved, how much bigger and better he would have gotten.
He saw the end goal. Like, he was so close to, really just, completely making it, in wrestling.
Would he have been, along with The Rock and Steve Austin and a few other guys, the biggest star in wrestling 5 years later? Probably. One of them.
Right now, what are your biggest goals, would you say?
Just rebuild my relationship with my kids. Having my, kids not be mad at me by the time I die. We'll see if that happens.
My dad's not here, so if I got one parent left that I can go, oh, well, that's my mom, that's just the way she is, sure, I could live the rest of my life hating her, but where does that get me? Ever since I've rekindled my relationship with her, I've been happier in my personal life. I've been better in my relationships with women. I've been more understanding of people's plights and people's vices. I've been just a much more mature adult in general since I've buried the hatchet with my mother, so to speak. And in many ways, I'm very happy that I have a parent left on this earth to speak to and talk to,
I called Mel a time or two, and man, we just lost contact. And man, I reached out to, Brian Jr. a couple years ago. I had one of Brian's old weightlifting belts.
Out of nowhere, a sign from the wrestling gods comes in the form of a cell phone call from Stone Cold Steve Austin to tell me that he has a Cardillo weightlifting belt that belonged to my father and that he wants to mail it to me and give it to me. And I'm like, you know what? If that's a sign, that's a sign.
Following in his father's footsteps, Brian Pillman Jr. decides to become a professional wrestler.
When he first said he was going to wrestle, it struck terror in my heart. I was like, oh my God, he'll have fractured relationships. His kids won't get the attention. He's going to travel all the time. He's not going to be able. And then I saw him perform. And I saw the look on his face when he knew that he was creating homage to his dad. And I realized this is it. This is what's supposed to happen.
He just woke up one day and he was gonna be a wrestler, and I literally laughed. I'm like, you, a wrestler? All you do is sit in your room and play video games. There's no way that you're gonna be a wrestler. And it was just crazy. Like, he was determined, and he quit his job that he had just graduated college, and he was gonna do it. And I was very hesitant at first just because of everything my dad went through, and I didn't want my brother to fall into that same lifestyle, so I was scared.
I think he'd be proud of it. His son wants to carry on the Pillman name. He wants to make his father proud of him. He wants to accomplish something on his own, but yet pay tribute to his dad. I think Brian would be into that. I just think he might be worried that Brian Jr. is in it all by himself. He's got some people looking out for him, but I think Brian Sr. would a whole lot rather be there and keep an eye on it.
Great kid, looks a lot like his dad. And I talked to him about these things. There's a lot of great traits, Brian, that your dad had that I hope to God you can acquire. And then there are some, not so much. You have to learn where you draw the line. Use his passion, use his intellect, use his athletic ability, use his love of the game. But then don't get too far off the beaten path. Don't be a loose cannon, Brian Jr. Don't be a loose cannon.
A lot of people, do you think your dad would want you to wrestle? And it's like, well, he kind of put his stamp of approval on me to be a wrestler when he named me Brian Pillman. There's really no going back at this point. So, no, it's just tragic to know that we never got to have that ultimate father-son relationship. But in a way, it inspires me to be a good father one day. So I think that's my goal in all of this, through wrestling and everything, is to be a father. So that photo is very symbolic to me. He's kind of holding me up, and I always look at it for inspiration. So I would hope that one day I would have a son like that, to kind of hold up as the future. It's like he's kind of giving me his blessing there in the photo. So
he contributed a whole lot to the wrestling business. He pushed the envelope. The loose cannon gimmick is one of the best ones ever created, and Brian was one of the best friends that I had in business. And I hope that he thought the same about me. Love Brian.
A dark and insidious undercurrent of unresolved personal conflict, deep-seated resentment, and profound emotional dysfunction secretly festered. And now, this carefully constructed, fragile edifice of the good life had utterly crumbled, giving way, with shattering speed, to an unimaginably tragic and irreversible conclusion. Initially, and rather conveniently for some, dismissed as a suicide by those first on the scene. The relentless and systematic investigative work of the Florida police was progressively unearthing compelling, undeniable evidence that Lanny's death involved foul play, unequivocally moving the entire narrative definitively into the grim and chilling territory of deliberate murder. A single, crucial forensic detail, initially overlooked in the chaos but meticulously uncovered during the professional crime scene analysis, definitively and irrevocably contradicted the preliminary, erroneous suicide assessment, causing a seismic shift in the investigation's direction. There was a bullet hole in the towel that was draped over the shower door, and it had stippling, which would be gunpowder burns on the outside of the towel. This finding was nothing short of a forensic bombshell, utterly dismantling the existing hypothesis. The distinctive pattern of unburnt or partially burnt gunpowder particles that embed themselves into tissue or fabric when a firearm is discharged at close range is an undeniable and highly specific indicator of proximity to the point of firing. Crucially, its explicit presence on the outside of the towel draped over the shower door meant, with scientific certainty, that the shot had come from an external position relative to Lanny inside the shower enclosure, which tells you that the gunshot was from the outside and not coming from the inside of the shower. The implications of this forensic revelation were immediate, undeniable, and utterly irreversible for the trajectory of the investigation. It was clear to them that this was not a suicide. This indisputable piece of physical evidence irrevocably transformed the very nature of the case, shifting it from a tragic accident or self-inflicted wound to a confirmed act of violence. The question was no longer if Lanny had tragically taken his own life, but definitively, who had violently and mercilessly taken it from him. Now we need to find out who killed Lanny. The dramatic shift from interpreting a sudden death as accidental to identifying it as a deliberate, malicious act was absolute, requiring a profound reorientation of investigative efforts and an immediate search for motive, means, and opportunity. The evolving narrative of the crime, with its shocking revelations, now hinted at further layers of complexity, deception, and impending emotional exposure. Coming up, scandalous secrets are exposed. It looked like it was more than just a business relationship. This foreboding promise indicated that the ostensibly professional relationships of Lanny Horowitz would soon yield to the exposure of intimate betrayals, clandestine affairs, and illicit dealings, which, for a criminal psychologist, are frequently the deep-seated motivations that fuel the most passionate and violent crimes within domestic settings. Furthermore, the perplexing possibility of multi-person involvement, initially posited as a confounding anomaly, persisted as a potent theory, and detectives questioned whether they're looking for more than one suspect. 10 shots had been fired. It could have been 2 shooters. The sheer numerical count of bullet wounds, a testament to intense and prolonged violence, continued to exert significant pressure on the investigation, leaving open the chilling possibility of coordinated or, alternatively, an individual acting with an almost terrifying and manic intensity of rage and lethal resolve, reloading under extreme duress. With definitive forensic evidence firmly establishing Lanny Horowitz's death as a murder, the Florida police formally and systematically transitioned their efforts into a full-scale homicide investigation. This crucial reclassification mandated a far more rigorous, meticulous, and comprehensive approach to the crime scene, to potential witnesses, and to the immediate family members involved. The formal arrival of the medical examiner, a crucial figure in the scientific unmasking of death's true nature, signaled the next critical phase, shifting the forensic focus from the immediate scene to the victim's body itself for a detailed post-mortem examination. Once the medical examiner arrived, he rolled the body over, and we were able to get a better look at the wounds on his body. This systematic procedure, revealing areas of the body previously obscured by the chaotic scene, immediately brought to light the full, horrifying extent of the violence inflicted upon Lanny. Even though you couldn't tell how many times he'd been shot, it was clear and obvious to the police that he'd been shot more than once. This preliminary observation at the scene itself, before the body was fully processed, immediately and unequivocally shattered the initial possibility of a singular, quick gunshot. The visual evidence of trauma was compelling. We noticed there were multiple bullet wounds on his right arm, on his torso. The enumeration of distinct wound sites his right arm and his torso painted a grim and indelible picture of a brutal, repeated assault, strongly suggesting a victim actively trying to defend himself, or a perpetrator determined to ensure absolutely certain death through sustained violence. With the medical examiner transporting the body for a detailed and exhaustive autopsy, a crucial scientific process that would reveal precise bullet pads, the specific caliber and type of projectiles, and the definitive number of wounds, detectives simultaneously intensified their focus on the immediate crime scene. meticulous in their efforts to painstakingly reconstruct the precise sequence of events and definitively identify the individual or individuals responsible for this heinous act. The bathroom, once a private and intimate space, now a confined and tragically desecrated enclosure, held a veritable treasure trove of forensic clues. There were projectiles pretty much everywhere in the bathroom. They were in the shower on the floor. There were some in the walls. There were some in the bathtub. The widespread dispersion of bullets and bullet fragments across various surfaces further corroborated the highly chaotic, violent, and dynamic nature of the attack, powerfully suggesting a struggle or a perpetrator moving while firing, rather than a static, single execution. Crucially, the total count of rounds fired, precisely recorded, remained an alarming figure. It was determined that 10 shots had been fired, at least one of which is what set the glass shatter alarm off. The 10-shot count was a powerful numerical statement of lethal intent, bordering on overkill, demanding a close and highly specialized examination of the weaponry involved. The revolver initially discovered near Lanny's lifeless form, though inadvertently moved by the well-meaning security guard, remained a key, albeit complex, piece of physical evidence. However, its standard capacity immediately posed a perplexing logistical challenge when weighed against the meticulously documented 10-shot count. The gun didn't have enough capacity to have fired all the number of bullets that had been fired. Most standard revolvers, by their design, typically hold either 5 or 6 rounds in their cylinder. This undeniable discrepancy between the weapon's capacity and the actual number of shots fired necessitated a careful and highly strategic consideration of the entire firing sequence. So if the person was to use the same weapon, they would have to remove the casings and reload that firearm. This specific act of reloading, demanding a momentary pause in the frenzied violent assault, implied a chilling level of sustained rage, an intentional and conscious continuation of the attack, rather than a singular, impulsive outburst. From a criminal psychology perspective, reloading a firearm during an active, violent act suggests a profound, unwavering determination, a killer, unwilling to let the victim survive, regardless of the momentary interruption or the risk involved. This possibility, however, immediately sparked an even more unsettling and crucial question among the investigative team. Investigators questioned if this could point to a second murder weapon or something even more sinister. It could have been 2 shooters, the ominous specter of multiple assailants working in concert, or a single, extremely resolute killer wielding 2 distinct weapons, introduced a terrifying layer of complexity to the developing profile of the crime and the perpetrator's psychological state. A comprehensive and meticulous search of the entire Horowitz residence was deemed absolutely indispensable, moving beyond the immediate, blood-soaked crime scene to systematically uncover any further evidence that might shed definitive lights on the violent events of that morning. There was a search warrant obtained from a judge to be able to search the house thoroughly, from top to bottom. This rigorous and extensive process, often revealing hidden facets of a household and the secret lives of its occupants, is a cornerstone of thorough investigation. The detailed search yielded a rather surprising discovery regarding the sheer volume of firearms in the family's possession. In total, we collected about 26 firearms from the home. We weren't expecting to find that many firearms in a house. This extensive collection spoke volumes about a specific interest, perhaps an obsession, or a deep-seated cultural inclination towards gun ownership within the family, transforming a single weapon in a tragic incident into a broader, environmental context of readily accessible and pervasive firepower. There was a firearm found in a locked safe, and in the attic there was a very extensive, expensive collection of firearms. While the responsible securing of many of these weapons in safes and hidden compartments might, in other circumstances, suggest a degree of caution or a collector's care, their sheer quantity indicated a pervasive presence of guns in Lanny's life, and, by direct extension, in the lives of those residing with him under the same roof. Crucially, amidst this sprawling arsenal of weaponry, one particular firearm stood out dramatically, bearing irrefutable recent evidence of having been discharged, offering a direct and unequivocal link to the morning's profound tragedy. Most of the weapons are safely locked away and have not been fired recently, but they find one that has. This immediate and highly specific finding drastically honed the investigation's focus, narrowing it down to a select few weapons. Another officer did find another firearm on the dresser in the master bedroom. That's connected to where the bathroom is. This second firearm, a revolver, also critically contained 5 spent casings, perfectly matching the number needed to complete the total 10-shot count when combined with the 5 rounds from the first revolver. The discovery of 2 distinct weapons, both recently fired and found in close proximity to the crime, strongly supported the theory of an intensely violent, sustained attack. Detectives immediately dispatched both revolvers to a crime lab for exhaustive and precise ballistics testing, a precise forensic process designed to definitively match fired bullets and casings to specific weapons, providing unassailable physical proof. Meanwhile, their continued systematic search of the property yielded another absolutely pivotal piece of information regarding potential entry points and the involvement of outside parties. They examined the perimeter of the home and determined that all the windows and doors were secure, locked from the inside. This meticulous inspection firmly and unequivocally closed off the possibility of an external intruder gaining access via forced entry, so there was no evidence that somebody had broken in. The logical conclusion for investigators, painstakingly built upon irrefutable physical and circumstantial evidence, became unavoidable, drastically narrowing the pool of viable suspects. Now, we have to think, is it somebody who was let in the house? Was it somebody in the house? The undeniable presence of only 3 individuals in the residence that fateful morning, Donna and Radlamente perpetrator, was in dispute, or potentially both acting in concert. It would be obvious that they would want to know from Bradley Horowitz and Donna Horowitz what's been going on. The investigation now focused sharply and inexorably on the 2 surviving family members, their accounts, and their possible motives. Officers first attempted to engage directly with Donna Horowitz, hoping to obtain her immediate account of the shocking and chaotic events that had just transpired. However, her profound emotional state and her subsequent actions presented an immediate and significant obstacle to straightforward questioning. Officers first tried talking to Donna. She was sitting in the front passenger seat of a car in the driveway. She was in her pajamas. She had bare feet. She had her knees up to her chest and rocking back and forth. This profound physical posture, a classic defensive, self-comforting, and highly agitated stance, often seen in individuals experiencing extreme trauma, profound fear, or acute psychological distress. Bennett, a vivid and distressing picture of her mental state. Her verbal response, or lack thereof, was equally telling and problematic. She kept saying, oh boy, and she just kept saying that sitting in the car, oh boy. This repetitive, almost childlike utterance, delivered in a broken rhythm, strongly suggested an overwhelmed and fragmented mind, demonstrably incapable of coherent articulation in the face of immense shock, profound guilt, or psychological dissociation. My mom refused to talk to anybody. She's not really communicating. She doesn't want to give a statement. Her immediate withdrawal and categorical refusal to provide a statement were, while constitutionally protected rights, nevertheless, a highly significant factor for astute investigators. From a criminal psychology perspective, while genuine trauma can certainly induce profound silence and an inability to speak, a categorical refusal to engage with authorities, especially in a case involving a murdered spouse and without the immediate presence of legal counsel, often subtly, yet distinctly, raises suspicion and fuels a detective's focus. So all of these things could be suggestive of somebody who's in a state of shock and trauma. While this initial assessment fairly acknowledged the very real possibility of genuine trauma impacting her, it crucially did not rule out other, potentially more sinister, psychological factors that might be contributing to her pervasive and absolute silence. Her son, Bradley, by distinct contrast to his mother's withdrawn state, presented a more outwardly cooperative and seemingly composed demeanor, appearing far more capable of responding directly and coherently to the probing questions from the seasoned detectives. Her son, Bradley, seems more capable of answering their questions. The detectives asked to talk to me in their car, and they were parked right in front of the house. The deliberate choice of the patrol car as an impromptu interview space, confined and inherently official, often creates a sense of isolation and subtle control, which can be conducive to encouraging open disclosure and minimizing distractions from the active crime scene. We sat in the car for maybe like 20 minutes. It was, I was down to sleep, and it was like pop, pop, and the alarm was going off, and I heard screaming. Radley's immediate and unfiltered account began with a vivid auditory recollection of a terrifying awakening. The sharp, percussive sounds of gunfire, followed by screaming, and the piercing, insistent, blare of the house alarm. His visceral reaction to these jarring sounds, indicating a genuinely startled and deeply disturbed state, provided an initial, honest human element to his testimony. I was scared. This candid and raw admission of intense fear provided an immediate and relatable psychological anchor to his narrative, underscoring the sudden shock of the event. He then meticulously described the precise layout of the home, a crucial detail for subsequent verification of his observations. My pocket door. There's a little alcove, and it looks across the living room in front entrance. My parents' bedroom was on the other side. This architectural description would later allow investigators to meticulously assess the spatial accuracy and credibility of his claimed observations from his vantage point, determining if what he said he saw was physically possible. When pressed about his mother's demeanor in the immediate aftermath, Radley's description powerfully corroborated the officer's initial, raw impressions. What was your mom's demeanor? What would she say? She was screaming. Was she saying anything? What happened? She was distraught. You know, I got her some water, and she calmed down. His depiction of his mother's extreme distress, coupled with his seemingly spontaneous act of offering her comfort and practical assistance, demonstrated a filial concern and protective instinct that, at face value, appeared entirely genuine and immediate. He recounted catching a horrifying, yet crucially limited and indirect, glimpse of his father's final, agonizing moments. Through the bedroom door, he caught a glimpse of his father. My father was laying on the floor facing away from me, and then he made that horrible gurgling noise. And I got out of there. I never went into the bathroom. This intensely visceral account suggested a indirect witnessing of the grim aftermath, leading to an immediate and instinctive retreat from the scene, driven by profound shock, revulsion, and an understandable urge for self-preservation from a truly gruesome sight. When questioned about his seemingly delayed action in calling emergency services, an action that might otherwise be deemed unusual, Radley directly attributed it to his profound state of shock and disorientation, asserting that the security guard had arrived before he had the emotional, cognitive capacity to fully process the situation or take immediate action. When asked why he didn't immediately call 911, Radley claims he was in shock, and the guard showed up before he had the chance. He was very confused about what had happened, and, obviously, and understandably very upset. This explanation, deeply plausible in the harrowing context of extreme stress and unexpected trauma, was carefully considered and provisionally accepted by investigators. Radley vehemently maintained his position that he had not physically seen who had fired the fatal shots, but consistently conveyed a strong, unshakable desire to cooperate fully and transparently with the entire investigation, eager to assist in any way he could. Radley says he didn't see who shot his father, but wants to help investigators however he can. I was trying to, cooperate with them. They asked if they could do a gunshot residue test on me. I'm like, okay, let's do the test. His voluntary and immediate submission to a gunshot residue test, a common and highly specific forensic tool, demonstrated an overt openness, an apparent lack of concealment, potentially arguing strongly against his direct physical involvement as the shooter. This willing compliance was a significant psychological signal. However, as the detectives, seasoned in the intricate dance of interrogation, subtly shifted their probing, moving towards any potential motives or pre-existing reasons why someone, particularly within the intimate circle, might harbor animosity towards or want to harm Lanny, Radley offered a profoundly revealing glimpse into his father's complex, often morally ambiguous character. But when investigators ask him if he knows of any reason why someone might want to do this, he reveals his father wasn't exactly a saint. This candid and unvarnished admission immediately and drastically complicated the victim's public image, moving Lanny Horwitz beyond a simple wealthy businessman to a figure deeply entangled in significant personal baggage and ethical compromises. Radley then forcefully introduced the insidious and corrosive theme of marital infidelity as a major, ongoing source of conflict. There were allegations or accusations that Lanny developed an affair or a more than business relationship with his business partner. This explicit revelation pointed directly and unequivocally to a long-standing, emotionally devastating source of profound marital discord and deeply rooted resentment within the Horwitz household. My parents wound up getting divorced in, 2000, after my parents divorced. My mom thought he'd been involved with Francine, but then when my mom and dad got back together, my mom finds out that my father's going to lunch with her, going to dinner with her. This convoluted, painful marital history, repeatedly marked by serial infidelity, temporary separation through divorce, and ill-fated reconciliation, provided a powerful, escalating narrative of prolonged betrayal and profound emotional torment, explicitly impacting his mother Donna in a devastating and cumulative fashion. Radley meticulously explained and carefully distinguished Francine's dual role in his father's life, attempting to separate professional acquaintance from personal entanglement. He explained that Francine was an acquaintance, that she was actually in business with Mr. Horowitz. However, he was equally emphatic that the relationship had long ago transgressed purely professional boundaries, becoming something far more intimate and secretive. My father kept telling her that she was just a business partner, but it looked like it was more than just a business relationship. There was a lot of sneaky stuff going on there with her. Radley's personal frustration, profound disappointment, and palpable sense of being constantly caught in the emotionally toxic crossfire of his parents' fraught and deeply unhealthy relationship were overtly evident in his recount. So, clearly, Radley also shed some light on that relationship. He was, shocked and disappointed that his dad was going to continue with this behavior, which, clearly, was upsetting to Donna Horowitz. His disappointment was clearly multifaceted. It encompassed the deep sense of betrayal inflicted upon his mother, the overarching dishonesty and manipulation displayed by his father, and the relentless, ongoing destabilization of what little remained of their family unit, all of which weighed heavily on him. A particularly disturbing and unexpected financial revelation added a concrete and compelling layer of potential motive to Francine's involvement in Lanny's complex life. He brought me something to sign, some legal stuff, and I'm like, "What's this?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm just doing something with the life insurance. Just sign that." So I signed it, and I found out later. I signed over $200,000 of his life insurance money to Francine. This staggering and apparently deceptively obtained transfer of a substantial sum in life insurance proceeds immediately positioned Francine not merely as a romantic entanglement, but as a highly significant financial beneficiary, providing her with a powerful and tangible material motive in Lanny's premature demise. That tells me that there's motivation there. She could have been looking at angle that for herself. The ominous specter of potential financial greed, combined with a confirmed, albeit complicated, romantic entanglement, created a potent and explosive psychological blend for a possible murder motive, drastically broadening the investigative lens to include the professional and personal connections. Armed with the deeply unsettling revelations of Lanny Horowitz's complex personal life, particularly his chronic, ongoing affair with his business partner, Francine, and the highly controversial life insurance policy that suddenly made her significant beneficiary, detectives understood the absolute imperative to formally interview Francine, the woman at the very center of the marital storm and emotional entanglement. Their underlying investigative philosophy was to approach her without deeply ingrained preconceived notions, carefully allowing her to articulate her own comprehensive version of events without leading questions. After learning of Lanny Horowitz's possible affair, detectives need to have conversations with the women in his life. Our goal was, if one of them would agree to talk to us, we would let them tell us what happened. This seemingly neutral and non-confrontational approach was strategically designed to encourage voluntary transparency and disclosure. Donna Horowitz, however, consistent with her earlier demeanor, maintained her steadfast refusal to engage directly with law enforcement, swiftly securing legal counsel as soon as possible after the incident. Donna Horowitz got an attorney right away, and we were informed by the attorney that she would not be speaking with us. This swift legal maneuver, while unequivocally within her constitutional rights as a suspect, was nevertheless a highly significant factor for the investigators. From a seasoned criminal psychology perspective, while genuine shock and trauma can indeed compel silence and a desire for legal protection, a categorical refusal to speak, especially in a case involving the murder of one's spouse, often subtly yet distinctly amplifies detective focus and can be interpreted as a potential indicator of a need for active legal protection or the careful concealment of deeply incriminating information. Fortunately, Radley's prior, extensive interview had inadvertently provided key and highly practical information regarding Francine's precise whereabouts, making a rapid contact possible. Thankfully, Radley knows where they can find Francine. Francine lived right down the street, so she was in the same development. This geographical proximity immediately made an urgent visit feasible and strategically significant. Detectives, wasting no time, promptly paid Francine a visit, bearing the somber and deeply unsettling news of Laney's murder. Her initial reaction, carefully observed, was visibly distraught and emotionally upset, presenting a compelling facade of profound shock and grief. Detectives pay her a visit and deliver news of Laney's murder. She was very distraught, very emotionally upset, almost in shock. The investigators' cautious, sensitive approach in delivering the devastating news was evident in their measured and empathetic introduction, designed to minimize further distress while carefully laying the groundwork for questioning. Obviously, we've just explained to you that Laney, who you know, has been found there, okay? How old are you born? Well, we'll explain all that to you, but we'd like to ask you a few questions first. Francine's account of her immediate plans with Laney, delivered in her state of apparent distress, immediately and powerfully pointed to the deeply intimate nature of their relationship, overtly reinforcing Radley's earlier suspicions about his father's persistent infidelity. Francine says she and Laney were supposed to be leaving that morning on a business trip to North Carolina. They did plan this whole entire week of such fun to go for again. The specific phrasing, a whole entire week of such fun, used to describe their intended trip, clearly transcended the bounds of mere professional engagements, strongly implying a romantic getaway or an extended personal rendezvous, rather than a strict dispassionate business venture. To the experienced investigators, this almost conversational detail definitively confirmed the deeply rooted and ongoing nature of the illicit affair. Francine freely and openly expressed her deep emotional connection to Laney, portraying him as an important figure in her life. To investigators, it sounds like more than just business, which seems to confirm Radley's suspicions. She found him to be very near and dear to her heart. However, she quickly and meticulously qualified the depth of Laney's emotional investment in their relationship, carefully acknowledging his reportedly stronger emotional commitment compared to her own, perhaps hinting at a power imbalance, or a reluctance on her part, to fully commit. She indicated, though, that Mr. Horowitz had deeper feelings for her than she was ready for at that time. She openly admitted that Laney, propelled by his evidently stronger feelings, had gone so far as to propose marriage, an offer she had, crucially, declined. She admitted that Mr. Horowitz had asked her to marry him, but she had declined that offer because, as she explained it, she was recently divorced and wasn't ready to move on. This carefully articulated explanation portrayed her as emotionally cautious, still recovering from a prior marital perhaps deliberately detached from the intense emotional and financial entanglement Laney seemingly harbored for her, a nuanced psychological presentation that was carefully noted. When directly confronted with the unsettling revelation of the $200,000 life insurance policy, Francine's response was notably dismissive, bordering on light-hearted, and perhaps strategically performative. When they asked Francine about the life insurance policy, she says she didn't expect anything from Laney. She said to me, "Francine took care of your ex's wife." I said, "I'm not going to laugh. Is there going to be a penny?" Joking. Joking. Always joking. This performance of detached amusement, peppered with self-deprecating humor and an air of feigned nonchalance, while conceivably an attempt to genuinely deflect suspicion or simply mask true emotions, would have been meticulously noted and carefully analyzed by seasoned criminals. Such an incongruent response, appearing to mock or trivialize the gravity of a life insurance policy and the seriousness of the situation, often subtly yet distinctly signaled a degree of calculated composure, a psychological defense mechanism, or even an underlying deception that warranted further scrutiny. Regarding her precise movements on the morning of the murder, Francine provided a seemingly clear, coherent, and readily verifiable alibi, which was crucial for establishing her non-involvement in the physical act itself. Police did ask Francine where she had been around 7:00 a.m. She was able to fairly readily prove to them that she'd gotten up and was packing and getting ready to pick him up at 8. Her consistent and verifiable account of her activities during the critical time window, coupled with her apparent and overt distress over Laney's death, collectively convinced investigators of her non-involvement as the direct physical perpetrator. Clearly, she was very distraught about what had happened to her. And, they were confident that Francine didn't have anything to do with this. Her visible emotional reaction, perceived as genuine, combined with her demonstrably truthful alibi, effectively moved her out of the immediate circle of direct suspicion for Laney's physical death, at least in the primary role of shooter. However, Francine's utility to the painstaking investigation extended far beyond merely clearing her own name. She provided crucial incriminating information that dramatically refocused and significantly sharpened the inquiry, turning it definitively towards another key individual. According to Francine, investigators should be looking at Lanny's wife, Donna. This was a significant and strategically delivered redirection of focus. Francine then proceeded to paint a vivid and disturbingly detailed picture of the tumultuous and volatile Horowitz marriage, one plagued by chronic instability. Francine just told police that Donna Horowitz and Lanny Horowitz had been married, divorced, married, divorced. This highly unstable and repetitive pattern of repeatedly dissolving and then rebuilding their union spoke volumes about a fundamentally, emotionally draining, and chronically conflict-ridden relationship. There was discontent in arguments, and a volatile kind of relationship. This constant state of simmering conflict, frequently erupting into bitter arguments and deeply wounding exchanges, had, over time, created a fertile and dangerously explosive ground for intense resentment and murderous fury to develop and fester, poisoning the very foundation of their bond. Francine further revealed Lanny's most recent and desperate attempt to definitively sever ties with Donna, signaling his absolute resolve. Francine tells investigators Lanny recently hit a breaking point and asked Donna to move out. This decisive and brutal act of expulsion, intended to physically remove Donna from their shared home, was undoubtedly a catastrophic psychological blow to Donna's already fragile self-perception and her almost obsessive desire for a unified, idyllic family unit. Perhaps most chillingly and prophetically, Francine imparted Laney's explicitly stated and deeply personal fear of Donna, adding a sinister dimension to their relationship. Francine told police that Lanny Horowitz had confided in her that he was afraid of Donna. According to Francine, she had said to Lanny Horowitz, "You need to hide your guns." This stark and unambiguous warning from Francine to Lanny, specifically advising him to conceal his extensive collection of firearms, due to a genuine and expressed fear of his own wife, painted Donna not merely as an emotionally wounded individual, but as a potentially dangerous, unpredictable, and potentially lethal threat. Such an explicit statement from an outside party, reflecting the victim's own profound fear, carried immense and highly incriminating weight for the investigators, profoundly shifting the psychological dynamic. It positioned Donna not as a grieving widow, but as a credible threat, perceived as a present danger by those closest to the victim. When subsequently queried about Radley Horowitz, Francine's response, carefully articulated, further intertwined the mother and son's potential motives and behaviors, hinting at a complex and potentially destructive interpersonal dynamic. When they ask her about Radley Horowitz, she has a similar response. The implied link between mother and son's capacity for behavior and potential aggression further complicated the psychological profile and deepened the web of family secrets. Based on Francine's pivotal and profoundly revealing interview, both Donna and Radley, the sole surviving occupants of the residence, abruptly re-emerged as the strongest, most compelling suspects. Their individual and intertwined motives now chillingly outlined with stark clarity. The complex intersection of Lanny's chronic marital turmoil, his manipulative financial maneuverings, and his explicit, communicated fear of his wife, coupled with Radley's deep-seated grievances stemming from his past legal troubles and his father's perceived betrayal, formed a powerful and disturbing constellation of reasons for potential, and ultimately actual, violence. The much anticipated arrival of the long-awaited autopsy results from the medical examiner provided the crucial forensic corroboration of a deeply personal, rage-fueled, and visceral crime, powerfully consistent with a crime of passion. It was concluded that there were 9 bullet wounds, including 1 to the mouth. The sheer numerical count of 9 distinct bullet wounds was undeniably significant, speaking to extreme violence. But the singular, horrifying detail of the gunshot to the mouth irrevocably transformed the narrative, from a generic homicide into one saturated with profound, specific emotional malice, pointing to a deeply personal message. For a seasoned criminal psychology analyst, the nature and location of the shot to the mouth are exceptionally telling, transcending mere physical lethality. The last shot in the mouth is overkill. That's an emotional reaction. That's a reaction that usually comes with anger or rage. This specific injury is rarely, if ever, purely tactical. Instead, it carries a profound, symbolic, and deeply personal weight. It is often interpreted as an act of absolute silencing, of ultimate contempt, of expressing a burning desire to literally and symbolically shut someone up. Someone who had perhaps inflicted deep emotional wounds with their words, their persistent lies, their perceived verbal abuse, or their calculated betrayals. It speaks not merely to an intent to kill, but to a deep, visceral, and unbridled rage, a desire for communicative annihilation. Such an act is a highly expressive display of intense fury, frequently characteristic of intimate partner violence where emotions have reached an explosive and utterly destructive zenith, where communication has irrevocably broken down, leaving only the language of violence. Complementing the gruesome and emotionally charged forensic findings of the autopsy, crucial technical data retrieved from the home's advanced security system further and irrefutably constrained the possibilities regarding external involvement, focusing the investigations solely inward. So police talked to the alarm company. In this case, in looking at the display panel of the alarm, no door had been opened prior to the 911 call. This precise electronic evidence definitively confirmed that absolutely no one had entered or exited the home immediately before the alarm was triggered by the shattering glass, thereby eliminating with absolute certainty the possibility of an external intruder. The logical deduction for law enforcement became unavoidable and chillingly direct. The perpetrator was one of the only two surviving adult individuals inside the house at the time of the shooting. There were only two people that could be suspects: Donna and Radley. Either Radley did it, Donna did it, or they both did it together. The canvas of potential perpetrators, initially broad, had inexorably narrowed to an agonizingly intimate domestic tragedy, forcing investigators to confront the terrible truth that the killer resided within the victim's immediate family. The unfolding drama now moved towards the inevitable and psychologically charged phase of direct confrontation and meticulous scrutiny. Coming up, detectives pit son against mother. This potent foreshadowing hinted at the intense psychological pressure and tactical brilliance that would be brought to bear on both individuals as seasoned investigators meticulously sought to crack the case and extract the full, unvarnished truth. However, in the immediate term, both primary suspects, despite the mounting evidence, remained steadfast in their resolute denials and their carefully constructed narratives. But their suspects both refused to crack. He said, "All I can tell you is there were all the tourists in the house, and I didn't do it." Radley's persistent, slightly garbled assertion, the term tourists likely being an emotional slip, referring to the overwhelming, unsettling presence of uniformed police, forensic teams, and emergency personnel within his private sanctuary, underscored his stubborn denial of any direct physical involvement in the shooting. His adamant refusal, coupled with Donna's continued strategic silence and legal protection, presented a significant and profound investigative challenge. How to pierce this psychological wall of obfuscation and silence, and definitively unearth the full, unvarnished, and unequivocal truth of what transpired in that affluent Florida home. 6 agonizingly long days had elapsed since the brutal and chaotic murder of Lanny Ho, and with each passing hour, the immense pressure on investigators intensified, fueled by public interest and the need for justice. The meticulously gathered statements from all involved parties, combined with the growing mountain of forensic evidence, particularly following Francine's illuminating and redirecting interview, had firmly hardened their collective resolve to uncover the undeniable truth, no matter how Radley Horowitz, in stark contrast to his mother's almost impenetrable silence, continued to display a notably greater degree of cooperation, perhaps driven by a desperate, intrinsic need to genuinely clear his name, or motivated by an earnest desire to find some measure of closure and understanding in the wake of the devastating family tragedy. Radley Horowitz proves to be more cooperative than his mother. His attorney arranged for him to arrive at the Jupiter Police Department for a videotaped and audiotaped interview with detectives. The formal setting of the police interrogation room, stripped bare of personal comforts, and under the objective eye of both video and audio recording equipment, underscored the absolute seriousness and legal gravity of the situation, subtly, yet powerfully urging precise and truthful recollection from Radley. Detectives, employing a standard but highly effective psychological tactic designed to elicit comprehensive information, invited Radley to recount the morning's harrowing events in his own words, allowing for a comprehensive, free-flowing narrative that might inadvertently reveal subtle inconsistencies or previously overlooked critical details. "Let's go over again. You tell us in your words what happened that morning." "I just saw like my mom screaming and running, like in and out of the bedroom." His account remained largely consistent with his previous statements, vividly centered around his mother's frantic movements and distressed cries, firmly placing her as a central, agitated figure in the immediate aftermath. Radley then added a highly specific auditory detail, a sound indicative of a firearm operating beyond its immediate ammunition capacity. Radley goes on to describe hearing a clicking noise, as if a gun was running out of ammo but still being triggered. This highly specific sound, precisely consistent with the dry fire of an empty chamber in a revolver, provided strong corroboration for the later ballistics findings of multiple shots fired, indeed necessitating the use of 2 weapons or a reload, thus aligning his narrative with the cold, hard realities of the crime scene's forensic evidence. Yet, even with this precise detail, he carefully maintained a guarded, precisely articulated lack of definitive, eyewitness knowledge regarding the immediate actions of the shooter. It was because it's still under him. You know, I don't know. So, I'm not going to say I don't know. His cautious and repeated use of I don't know strategically limited his direct observation of the shooter's specific identity, but subtly, yet powerfully, left the implications and potential conclusions hanging palpably in the interrogation room's charged atmosphere. Detectives, seasoned in interpreting subtle psychological cues, verbal inflections, and body language, sensed that Radley, despite his overt cooperation, might still be withholding crucial pieces of information or actively shielding someone. They pressed him gently, yet firmly and persistently, aiming to delve deeper into any perceived omissions. Detectives suspect Radley is holding back, so they push harder. Based on what you told us about the morning, it just seems like there's still something missing here. This deliberate phrasing, inviting him to actively fill what the detectives presented as perceived gaps in his narrative, was designed not to accuse, but to psychologically prompt a more complete and uninhibited disclosure. The direct, unambiguous, and critical question eventually arrived, placing Radley squarely in the investigative crosshairs, leaving no room for equivocation. I just want to ask you, did you shoot your father, or were you involved in any way? Absolutely not. I did not shoot my father. I was not involved in any way. I was woken up to gunfire. Radley's categorical, resolute, and emotionally charged denial remained absolute and entirely unshakable, strikingly consistent throughout all his interviews, conveying a profound and genuine conviction of his innocence. His unwavering refusal to implicate himself in the physical act of murder or any conspiratorial involvement definitively narrowed field of primary suspects even further. Radley would only ever tell us, "All I can tell you is, there were only 2 of us in the house, and I didn't do it." This simple, yet psychologically powerful, assertion placed the full and undeniable weight of suspicion squarely and almost solely on the only other adult present and unaccounted for during the crime, his mother, Donna. Despite his vehement and consistent insistence on his own innocence regarding the physical act of the shooting, Radley openly and candidly admitted that his relationship with his father had been, at times, severely fraught with tension, profound emotional complexities, and animosity, creating a fertile ground for past grievances. Despite his insistence, Radley does admit his relationship with his father was rocky at times. I remember them asking me if my dad was abusive, and I said, only mentally. I used the term needling at the time. I thought they could push your buttons. This forthright acknowledgement of his father's mental abuse and persistent needling, a subtle, yet corrosive form of psychological torment, provided a highly plausible emotional context for a deeply rooted historical resentment, a psychological vulnerability that astute investigators meticulously noted and carefully folded into their evolving profile of the family dynamics. The undeniable root cause of much of this deep-seated familial conflict, Radley bravely revealed, stemmed directly from a past legal ordeal, a scarring and profoundly impactful chapter in his otherwise privileged life. The source of their conflict was connected to Radley's past legal problems. My parents got me into guns when I was younger, and I really took to it. This burgeoning passion for firearms, ironically initially fostered and encouraged by his very own parents, had, tragically and inadvertently, taken an unfortunate and ultimately damaging turn, leading him down a perilous legal path. So I decided to get an FFL license, federal firearms license, and start a little gun business. However, a misguided foray into specialized, legally ambiguous firearms technology, coupled with what he perceived as his father's seemingly authoritative and legally informed advice, precipitously triggered a catastrophic legal entanglement for Radley. So he wanted to, at one point, buy us an accessory that would transform a gun that was not automatic into an automatic weapon, and didn't know if it was legal or not. I showed it to my dad. And I'm like, God, look what these guys are selling online. This thing. And he says, just finger order it. And he's the smart one. He's the lawyer. Radley, in a tragic act of trust and deference to his father's purported legal expertise, unfortunately, and irrevocably followed this ill-fated counsel. According to Radley, he said, I followed his advice and I bought it. Well, of course, the ATF in short order arrested Radley for purchasing that equipment. The subsequent federal arrest, directly and explicitly linked to what he adamantly perceived as his father's ill-informed and ultimately detrimental legal advice, carried devastating and indelible personal consequences for him. As a result of that arrest, Radley's vehicle was confiscated, and he was sentenced to federal prison. I got 5 months down in a minimum security camp in Miami. This profoundly impactful experience in federal prison stripped him not only of his personal freedom and physical liberty, but also irrevocably of his cherished passion and his legitimate business enterprise. Because of the firearms conviction, Radley Horowitz was forbidden by law to ever possess a gun. He couldn't have his shop, and he largely blamed his father for that. The profound and permanent loss of his gun business, and his legal right to possess firearms, a core and formative part of his burgeoning identity and passion, became a significant, tangible, and deeply personal source of unwavering grievance and bitter resentment against his father. That was a huge, huge part of my life that was taken from me. While consistently maintaining his resolute innocence in the actual murder, Radley's candid, albeit emotionally charged, testimony undeniably and inadvertently revealed a potent, deep-seated, and long-standing motive for profound animosity towards Lanny, providing a clear psychological underpinning for potential, though not necessarily actual, involvement. Radley has just confirmed his own potential motive for killing Lanny. Radley was a suspect. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Again, 3 people in the home, 1's dead. This stark and unambiguous truth, from the objective perspective of an experienced investigative team, was utterly inescapable and necessitated his inclusion in the suspect pool. Following Radley's comprehensive and meticulously documented interview, the detectives embarked upon a critical and systematic process of corroborating his statements through precise physical verification, leaving no detail unchecked. We knew at the conclusion of his statement, we wanted to go back to the house and see if anything was in there that was corroborative of what he was talking about. Even seemingly minor details, if verifiable, could significantly confirm or crucially deny the veracity of his narrative. When he told us he went to his door and could look and see into the living room from there, could he really? So we went and looked ourselves to see that. Yeah, you could see into the living room. And so it corroborated that he could see what he said he saw. This simple, yet powerful, physical verification lent significant and undeniable credence to Radley's spatial account of the immediate aftermath. Another seemingly innocuous detail from Radley's narrative, specifically his act of offering comfort, presented an additional opportunity for further and precise corroboration, which could cement the timeline of events. During Radley's interview, he also said after the shooting, he brought his mother a bottle of water to calm down. Where'd the bottle of water go? This seemingly trivial, yet highly specific detail became a focal point for the diligent evidence technicians. A meticulous search of the immediate crime scene, specifically the tragically intimate bathroom, revealed a singular, telling object. We checked in the bathroom where Lanny Horowitz lay on the ground. There was a single water bottle on the sink right above his head, so we collected that water bottle to be processed for DNA. This discovery, precisely placing a water bottle entirely consistent with Radley's statement in such alarmingly close proximity to the victim's body, added another crucial layer of verification, underscoring the accuracy of his account and potentially placing his mother near the victim immediately after the shooting. We're basically able to corroborate just about anything and everything that Radley Horowitz told us. This systematic and successful corroboration of numerous specific details significantly strengthened the overall credibility and veracity of Radley's comprehensive account, even as his stated deep-seated resentment against his father continued to provide a powerful, pre-existing psychological motive for animosity. However, the most decisive and ultimately exonerating piece of physical evidence, which began to truly clarify Radley's specific role or, crucially, His profound lack thereof as the direct perpetrator of the shooting came from the results of his gunshot residue test. The detectives got the results back from Radley's GSR test, which was negative. This forensic finding was a pivotal and unambiguous moment in the investigation, scientifically indicating that Radley had not recently discharged a firearm or been in extremely close proximity to one that had, thereby significantly undermining and practically eliminating the possibility of his direct physical involvement as the person who fired the fatal shots. The stark contrast with his mother's actions was profound and telling. They didn't do it on my mom because she asked for a lawyer first. Donna's immediate and strategic invocation of her constitutional right to counsel, while perfectly legal, provided no such direct exonerating evidence and further amplified the investigative focus squarely upon her, leaving her open to deeper scrutiny. The cumulative weight of Radley's definitively negative GSR test results, combined with Donna's consistent and unwavering refusal to cooperate with law enforcement without legal representation, coupled with the existing body of compelling circumstantial evidence, converged into an undeniable and clear conclusion for the seasoned investigators. Those results and Donna's continued refusal to speak with them lead investigators to one conclusion. If Radley didn't hurt his dad, it started to paint a pretty clear picture and corroborate what we had sort of suspected to begin with. It actually was Donna, and we need to prove it. The psychological analysis and the intricate web of forensic evidence had now unequivocally tightened the circle of suspicion around Donna Horwitz. She had, in the discerning eyes of law enforcement, transformed from a grief-stricken wife into the undisputed prime suspect in her husband's brutal murder. However, given her steadfast refusal to engage directly with authorities or offer a statement, the detectives were now faced with the arduous and intricate task of unearthing undeniable, irrefutable proof through alternative means, operating effectively without the benefit of a direct confession. Their relentless, methodical, and profoundly patient investigative efforts eventually bore fruit in a profoundly revealing and ultimately incriminating discovery, one that would unlock the very psychological core of the tragedy. While an exhaustive and meticulous search of the entire residence was diligently underway, meticulously aiming to collect and precisely process any and all potential physical evidence that could link a perpetrator to the crime, a truly significant and utterly unexpected breakthrough occurred, turning the investigation decisively. While I was processing the water bottle for DNA, detectives found Donna's journal. This unassuming notebook, hidden amidst the intimate personal effects within Donna's private sanctum, was destined, unbeknownst to her, to become the single most incriminating and psychologically revealing piece of evidence in the entire case. In her walk-in closet were lingerie drawers and small item drawers like that, and in one of those drawers was the book. It was an actual diary that dated back for quite a little bit. The discovery of this deeply personal and highly confidential document, secreted away in a place of utmost intimacy and privacy, hinted powerfully at its profound potential to unlock the profound secrets of Donna's innermost psyche, tumultuous currents of her deteriorating life and marriage. It promised an unfiltered, unadulterated glimpse into her final days leading up to the murder. Donna's journal, upon careful perusal by the investigative team, swiftly and definitively began to unravel the carefully constructed illusion of the Horwitzes of untroubled lifestyle, revealing a painful and unsustainable financial reality that had long been meticulously concealed beneath a polished exterior. Donna's diary reveals the Horowitzes' lavish lifestyle to be nothing but a mirage. Lanny Horowitz was upside down on the house. He was in dire need of money. This stark financial distress, meticulously hidden beneath an extravagant public exterior, painted a compelling portrait of a couple living significantly beyond their means, creating a potent and corrosive layer of practical tension and deep-seated anxiety that significantly exacerbated their already tumultuous emotional landscape. The most recent entries within the journal, however, intensely chronicled Donna's increasingly desperate, poignant, and often heartbreaking attempts to mend her profoundly fractured, infidelity-ridden marriage. The most recent entries are about Donna's attempts to put her troubled marriage back together. Beginning in January of 2011, the entries are just about daily, and they're very lengthy and very detailed. The sheer volume, the relentless frequency, and the obsessive granularity of these daily entries profoundly underscored her unwavering emotional investment, her fervent, almost pathological hope for reconciliation, and her deep, unfulfilled longing for familial unity. The diary was really black and white evidence in Donna's own words. You really see the inner workings of her thoughts about this, was the script that she had set in her mind for a happy life for both herself and Lanny. For a criminal psychology analyst, this journal was an utterly priceless artifact, offering an unparalleled, unadulterated, and profoundly intimate window into Donna's innermost psyche. It painstakingly revealed her cherished, deeply idealized vision of a happy, harmonious family life, a meticulously crafted personal script that she desperately, even delusionally, wished to follow and adhere to. The diary depicted a woman driven by an almost pathological and all-consuming yearning for a unified, perfect family unit, but tragically, and progressively, losing her firm grasp on objective reality, becoming inexorably entrapped within the labyrinthine, distorting confines of her own tortured mind. It depicted a woman in Donna who desperately wants a family, but then we see her getting lost in her own self, her own mind. The journal meticulously documented the slow, agonizing erosion of her idealized life and her perceived marital bliss. The diary starts to, "He doesn't come home again. He's with Francine. He's the..." These fragmented, emotionally charged sentences marked the brutal and incessant intrusion of cold, hard reality into her carefully constructed fantasies. The undeniable truth of Laney's pervasive, chronic infidelity and his consistently callous, emotionally abusive treatment of her steadily permeated the diary's pages, relentlessly shattering her cherished illusions one painful shard at a time. The reality of how Lanny's treating her happens. The diary captured the grim libido, erosion of her spirit. Detectives meticulously reconstructed the precise sequence of escalating events that ultimately led to catastrophic psychological breakdown, painstakingly utilizing the detailed chronological timeline so candidly provided by Donna's diary. A pivotal and ultimately fatal turning point occurred in the spring of 2011. While the couple were, at that point, legally divorced and residing separately, Lanny approached Donna with a seemingly benevolent, yet ultimately manipulative and self-serving proposition. Detectives learned that in the spring of 2011, while the couple were divorced and living apart, Lanny asked her to secure a $200,000 loan from her parents. This significant financial request, cunningly framed as a necessary means to repair their deeply fractured relationship, was disingenuously presented as an olive branch, a genuine pathway to reconciliation. It was, for Donna, imbued with profound and desperate emotional weight. He shared with her that if she could borrow this amount of money, they could move in together again. Donna believed together, if we can get this $200,000, we can get married again. We can be a family again. For Donna, this substantial loan was not merely a financial transaction. It was, in her heart and mind, a sacred, desperate, and ultimate investment in her dearest wish. The complete and miraculous restoration of her failing marriage and the idealized rebirth of her beloved family. Her belief in this potential outcome was fervent, her hope profound, and her desperation immense. However, after Donna, through what must have been an enormous amount of emotional and financial maneuvering, potentially incurring significant emotional debt and distress from her trusting parents, successfully obtained the $200,000, she was abruptly and cruelly confronted with a brutal and utterly shattering realization. Lanny's proclaimed commitment to saving their marriage was nothing more than a deceptive ploy. His true allegiance, as always, lay with himself and his mistress. But after Donna gets that money from her parents, she discovers Lanny isn't as invested in saving their marriage. He would say, "I'll be home at 5 o'clock, and we have dinner." And, he would share with her, "Oh, Francine, then I had to go to a business dinner. We got tied up." These casual, transparently false excuses and consistent dismissals of her expectations, delivered with a callous disregard for her feelings, were not merely instances of forgetfulness or benign scheduling conflicts, but were calculated acts of evasion and continued deception, incessantly reinforcing his ongoing affair with Francine. Each lie chipped away at Donna's fragile hopes, deepening her pain. The ultimate indignity, starkly revealing his profound disregard, came chillingly to light on her very own birthday, dramatically juxtaposed with Lanny's extravagant lifestyle with his mistress. She'd written in there about, "It was my birthday and we had hot dogs for the girl, but he took her 3 forks on her birthday, which is a very nice steakhouse." This painful, deeply personal comparison, her meager and solitary celebration contrasted with his lavish, romanticized dinner with Francine, vividly underscored the profound depth of Laney's calculated betrayal and Donna's crucial, escalating humiliation, all painstakingly recorded in the raw honesty of her journal. The most devastating blow, the one that definitively severed the very last, fragile thread of Donna's hope and propelled her into irreversible despair, came in the form of Laney's explicit and brutally candid declaration, a statement of ultimate emotional cruelty. According to her diary, Laney told her, "If I had known that Francine felt about me the way that I do now, I would never have asked you to move back in the house." This raw, unvarnished, and utterly unsympathetic confession was an act of extreme psychological cruelty, effectively and completely dismantling Donna's deeply cherished illusion that the $200,000 loan, extorted from her parents, was a genuine investment in their future together. Instead, it was exposed as merely a cynical means to an end for Laney, a financial convenience obtained through cold, calculated emotional manipulation and false promises. I think that was the turning point. Following this catastrophic and psychologically traumatizing revelation, Donna's diary entries, once filled with hope and yearning, abruptly plunged into an escalating, suffocating darkness, marking her descent into profound mental anguish. With this brutal and unequivocal truth finally laid bare, Donna's full and undeniable awareness of her complete exploitation and profound betrayal became shockingly, unforgettably clear, shattering her very last, fragile illusions beyond repair. After that, her diary entries take a darker turn. Donna becomes more and more aware of all the pieces of the puzzle that spell a different reality than the one that she's forecasted for herself and her family. The psychological defense mechanisms of denial finally and irrevocably crumbled into dust. Donna couldn't even lie to herself anymore. She knew she got taken, and here she had gotten $200,000 from her mom. And what a fool she must have felt like. The profound, suffocating shame of having unwittingly deceived her trusting parents, combined with the crushing humiliation of being so utterly and publicly manipulated by the man she loved, fueled a dangerously potent cocktail of despair, self-loathing, and burgeoning, uncontrollable rage. The meticulous psychological trajectory so candidly documented in her journal was chillingly clear and unambiguous, meticulously tracing her internal journey from hopeful anticipation to murderous fury. You see Donna's words getting worse and worse and worse and rising in intensity, through the diary to the explosion. That is, the homicide. The diary entries, once frequent, detailed, and emotionally expressive, became noticeably fewer and further between as the emotional storm gathered within her, until they ceased altogether. A terrifying and absolute silence before the cataclysmic storm. The last entry prior to the shooting, I think, was a week or two earlier, which was totally also telling because it'd been every day and then it got fewer and fewer. And then just before the killing, there's nothing. This chilling cessation of self-documentation represented the final internal capitulation, the critical point at which overwhelming emotional pain and unbearable humiliation gave way to a cold, unwavering, and violent resolve, silencing her inner voice before she silenced another. My father pushed her and pushed her and pushed her, and she snapped. This succinct yet powerfully evocative statement, offered by Radley, encapsulated the profound and protracted psychological torment and relentless provocation, cumulatively led to Donna's ultimate, tragic violence. The diary, a stark, unedited narrative of emotional collapse, combined with the comprehensive and irrefutable forensic evidence meticulously collected from the house, enabled seasoned detectives to painstakingly reconstruct a precise sequence of events and definitively understand the psychological impetus that fueled the shooting. The diary, combined with the evidence collected from the house, gives detectives a clearer picture of how the shooting took place. On the day before this crime occurred, he had plans on leaving for a couple of days to North Carolina with Francine. This imminent romantic getaway with his mistress, Francine, represented a final, egregious act of betrayal, designed to publicly and irrevocably cement his new commitment, providing the ultimate and unbearable trigger for Donna's explosive rage. Matter of fact, he had his bags packed, and he told her that he wanted her out of the house by the time he got back. This wasn't merely a casual request, it was a brutal ultimatum, an explicit and definitive expulsion, a declaration designed to demolish any last fragile remnant of Donna's cherished ideal of a unified family unit. Now he wants to break up the family. Now he's very much made a definitive statement about, not only am I doing this, but I want you out of my life. So hope to connect together with him disappears at that point. All illusions of reconciliation, All possibilities of a renewed life were irrevocably shattered, leaving only emptiness and a burning desire for retribution. In that moment of absolute despair, overwhelming humiliation, and furious, irreparable rejection, a monstrous and ultimately murderous resolution solidified in Donna's tortured mind. A plan for final vengeance. If she couldn't have Lanny, no one was going to have Lanny. And she taught him a lesson. She just reacted with that firearm. Both firearms. The methodical and irrefutable ballistic evidence, meticulously collected and analyzed, perfectly complemented and corroborated the psychological profile of explosive, premeditated rage. Ballistics confirmed that after emptying all 5 rounds in the first revolver, Donna retrieved a second pistol from the bedroom and emptied that one too. The deliberate deployment of 2 separate weapons, firing a total of precisely 10 shots into her husband, spoke unequivocally to premeditation, to a sustained and unyielding lethal intent, and to a desire for absolute finality. The total number of gunshots is clearly indicative of a first-degree murder. That's somebody that clearly intends that the target of their shooting, they want them dead. This was demonstrably no panicked, defensive act born of sudden fear, but a deliberate, relentless, and unsparing execution fueled by an all-consuming vengeance, meticulously carried out. That was not a defensive shooting or a protect-myself shooting. That was after. How could you do this to us? The profound psychological cry, imbued within the violence itself, was undeniably evident. A desperate, furious retaliation for years of calculated emotional abuse, manipulative financial exploitation, and ultimately, an unforgivable betrayal that had irrevocably shattered her life and her soul. On October 6, 2011, precisely 1 week after Laney's brutal and calculated murder, Donna Horowitz was formally placed under arrest by the Jupiter Police Department. The exhaustive and highly professional efforts of the investigative team painstakingly yielded a formidable and virtually ironclad case against her, built on a foundation of both scientific forensics and compelling psychological insight. The subsequent legal proceedings, designed to bring justice, focused intently on presenting this intricate web of physical evidence and profound psychological motivation to a jury of her peers. The hardest part of this entire case was trying to present the evidence in a methodical, sequential form that a jury using common sense would come to the right decision. We wanted to make sure we got it right. This emphasis on meticulous presentation, unimpeachable logical coherence, and painstaking factual accuracy underscored the unwavering commitment of the prosecution to ensure that justice was not only served but seen to be served fairly and unequivocally. In January 2013, Donna Horowitz stood trial in a Florida courtroom, facing the extremely grave charge of first-degree murder. Prosecutors, building a compelling narrative from the profound insights gleaned from Donna's brutally honest diary entries and the irrefutable forensic evidence, skillfully painted a harrowing portrait of a woman systematically pushed to the absolute brink of human emotional endurance by her husband's repeated, calculated, and deeply personal betrayals. Prosecutors paint her as a woman pushed to the brink by her husband's betrayal. This was a jilted woman. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. The prosecution effectively leveraged this timeless adage, rich in historical and psychological resonance, to powerfully connect Donna's horrific actions to a universally understood, albeit extreme, human reaction to profound betrayal and devastating heartbreak. We basically felt that a jury using its common sense would come to that same conclusion, that this is a classic case of love and revenge. The case was, therefore, presented not merely as a criminal act, but as a fundamental human tragedy, a narrative of passionate love corrupted and twisted by sustained torment into an unyielding, murderous fury. The chilling detail of the final shot, a profoundly symbolic act of violence, was not overlooked but meticulously highlighted. I remember Ethia McRoberts saying about that because the last shot was into his mouth, and that she said that you could tell it was a very vengeful, spiteful thing. She may have just had enough with him speaking ill and silenced him. The implication, driven home with potent psychological force, was crystal clear. Donna sought to silence, forever, the words, the lies, and the emotional abuse of the man who had verbally and emotionally tormented her for years, asserting a brutal and ultimate form of control. Rodley, tragically caught in the agonizing and relentless glare of the courtroom, was forced to confront the brutal, unvarnished truth of his father's violent end, a truth brought to life through irrefutable evidence. Any bit of sympathy that I had left for my mom was gone. when I saw those colored pictures of the worst thing I've ever seen. The graphic visual evidence of his father's violent and gruesome injuries, meticulously presented in court, obliterated any last lingering compassion he might have felt for his mother's emotional plight or justifications. In a dramatic and ethically questionable turn within the courtroom, the defense team, perhaps desperate to salvage any possibility of an acquittal, opted for a high, yet tragically often utilized, strategy, deliberately deflecting blame onto another party, specifically Donna's own son, Radley. The defense ultimately decides to claim Donna was innocent and points the finger at someone else. They argued that it was Radley that did it. This devastating and utterly reprehensible accusation, flung by a mother's defense, seeking to save herself by tragically sacrificing her son's reputation and potentially his freedom, highlighted a profound and horrifying moral collapse. My mom's lawyer, who said, "Oh, I resented my father and, either that I did it myself or that I hired a hitman." That's terrible. You talk about not winning Mom of the Year. That's not Mom of the Year. Radley's personal outrage and deeply felt sense of betrayal at this calculated maneuver by his mother's legal team was visceral and painfully clear, representing the final, most egregious insult from the woman who bore him. The prosecution, however, swiftly and methodically dismantled this flimsy and opportunistic defense, exposing its fundamental logical inconsistencies and lack of supporting evidence. I knew it was a bad defense. He was living for free, in a very nice house, in Admiral's Cove, with his dad. He had nothing to gain by hurting his dad. Furthermore, the imaginative but utterly improbable notion of Radley hiring an unknown assassin for such a personal crime was quickly and effectively dismissed by the prosecution team. The prosecution argues that the only thing less likely than Radley shooting his father is him hiring someone else to do it for him. From our perspective, it didn't make a lot of sense. That was foolish to suggest that you pay good money, a lot of money, to hire a professional hitman and they don't bring their own gun. The categorical absence of any evidence of a third, external party being present in the home, meticulously corroborated by the precise data from the alarm system, definitively sealed the fate of this improbable and desperate defense. And there was no evidence of a third person. By checking with the alarm company, there had been no ingress or egress for a door prior to the glass shower. The facts presented an inescapable truth. On January 17, 2013, after careful and thoughtful deliberation, the jury, having heard all the evidence and arguments, finally rendered its verdict. On January 17, after about 2 hours of deliberation, they found her guilty as charged of first-degree murder with a firearm, and she was thereafter sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The swift and unanimous verdict brought a measure of profound justice for Lanny Horowitz and a clear sense of accountability for Donna's premeditated, violent actions. However, the complex legal saga was not yet complete. Donna, as was her undeniable constitutional right within the American legal system, immediately appealed her conviction, initiating another lengthy process. Jana immediately appeals her conviction. At the very end of the trial, the last seconds of the trial, the assistant prosecutor got up there and said, "Oh, by the way, she refused to talk to the police that morning." So, this seemingly minor and almost offhand comment from the prosecutor, uttered in the intense heat of closing arguments, proved to be a critical and ultimately fatal legal error, inadvertently violating a fundamental constitutional protection afforded to all defendants. You can't comment on a defendant's right to remain silent. That's a constitutional issue. The appellate court, upholding these vital principles of jurisprudence, meticulously recognized the prejudicial impact of this statement on Donna's right to a fair trial. Approximately 2 years after the conviction and sentence, the appellate court thought that was significant enough to reverse the case for a new trial. The court determined the error was significant enough to necessitate starting the entire legal process anew. Despite the necessity of a retrial due to a procedural misstep rather than a re-evaluation of the substantive evidence, the underlying strength and overwhelming weight of the evidence against Donna remained unassailable and undiminished. The retrial, the strategy didn't change. They just went forward and retried the case again, almost identical to the first time. The prosecution, unwavering in their belief of Donna's culpability, presented the same compelling narrative and evidence with similar precision. 4 years after her initial conviction, the evidence once again, compellingly and irrevocably, pointed to Donna as the sole perpetrator of her husband's murder. 4 years after Jana's first conviction, she is found guilty again. She got a 32-year sentence, which is effectively a life sentence, while the numerical length of the sentence was technically modified from life without parole. Its practical outcome for Donna Horowitz remained tragically the same. To all intents and purposes, spend the remainder of her natural life incarcerated, a prisoner of her own devastating rage. I do think justice was served. It's tragic that she was so heartbroken that you just can't go and kill the person that broke your heart. This poignant and profoundly humanistic reflection eloquently underscores a core moral lesson embedded within this case. While emotional pain, heartbreak, and betrayal can indeed be overwhelmingly destructive and agonizingly deep, they can never, under any circumstance, morally or legally justify the premeditated act of taking another human life. Radley's final reflections on the catastrophic saga of his parents painted a deeply personal picture of irrevocable hurt, profound disappointment, and a gradual, hard-won journey towards a semblance of personal peace and acceptance. The enduring sting of his mother's ultimate betrayal, her cynical attempt to scapegoat him and shift blame for her own heinous actions, remained a deep and lasting wound. For Mom to kill the father and then to blame your son, Jana will have to reconcile her life when Judgment Day comes for her, and I don't believe it'll be pretty for a person like her. The sheer moral bankruptcy of her actions, intensified exponentially by her willingness to condemn her own child in a desperate bid for freedom, left an indelible and deeply scarring mark on Radley's psyche. Radley's personal emotional shift, his ultimate loss of all lingering sympathy for his mother's suffering, was a stark testament to the visceral and undeniable impact of the brutal truth. Even though she tried to blame me, I was very sympathetic still to my mom until I saw the pictures of my dad. More god-opsy pictures. That was the end of any sympathy for my mom there. The graphic and undeniable evidence of his father's violent, merciless end, meticulously presented in the courtroom, irrevocably extinguished any remaining emotional bonds or lingering understanding he might have harbored for his mother's plight or her stated justifications. When I say I miss my parents, I miss, when I was growing up, when things were good, but, I don't miss the people that they became at all. This profound and deeply personal statement, imbued with a bittersweet melancholy for a lost, idealized past, perfectly encapsulated the devastating and irremediable transformation his parents underwent. From cherished figures of his childhood to broken, morally compromised individuals consumed by their own destructive demons. Despite the profound and multi-layered trauma inflicted upon him by both of his parents, Radley, against all odds, found a courageous path to not only endure, but to eventually reclaim his inner peace and move forward. What my parents did to me, I'm still here and they're not, and I sleep just fine at night. This final, resilient assertion is a powerful testament to the indomitable human spirit, a beacon of hope shining, even in the darkest shadows of familial tragedy, firmly affirming that the triumph of good over evil, or at least the profound triumph of personal peace over corrosive bitterness and consuming resentment, is always a possible, attainable reality. This tragic narrative stands as a potent and enduring lesson in the destructive power of unchecked, vengeful emotion and the relentless, often arduous, pursuit of profound justice. The tranquil facade of wealth and prestige can, at times, become a brittle veneer, shattered by the abrupt eruption of raw, unbridled human emotion, revealing the tumultuous undercurrents that often belie outward appearances. Such was the unsettling reality that began to meticulously unfold in the heart of Florida, a narrative deeply steeped in both the glittering allure of affluence and the grim, foreboding shadows of profound despair, a pervasive sense of violation, a palpable chill that seeped into the very foundations of the seemingly idyllic domestic space, descended upon the scene, irrevocably marking a luxurious home as the chilling epicenter of a horrific and deeply personal crime. A wealthy businessman is murdered in his Florida home. There was blood spatter everywhere. It was on the walls, on the sink, on the bathtub. These initial, stark observations, delivered with the professional brevity characteristic of a preliminary police report, nonetheless painted a vivid and visceral portrait of intense violence, an utterly chaotic finality. From the very outset of the investigation, it was unequivocally clear that this was no gentle passing, no quiet and dignified departure from life's stage. The ubiquitous presence of blood, splashed and smeared across surfaces typically associated with cleansing, intimate personal rituals, and domestic tranquility, immediately and emphatically signaled a ferocious struggle, indicating a deeply personal and shockingly uncontrolled act, irrevocably for a criminal psychology analyst, trained to read the silent language of a crime scene. The sheer quantity and widespread distribution of blood spatter offer immediate profound insights, moving beyond mere grim cataloging into a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the crime's intricate dynamics. When crimson droplets and pooling are found everywhere, not confined to a single point but liberally coating vertical surfaces like walls, interspersed chillingly amidst the utilitarian fixtures of a bathroom sink, and clinging tenaciously to the gleaming ceramic basin of a bathtub, it speaks volumes about the ferocity and the uncontrolled nature of the event. Such extensive and widespread spatter typically indicates forceful impacts, a rapid succession of violent movements, perhaps multiple blows or, in this particular and harrowing case, multiple gunshots inflicted upon a moving, struggling, and desperately fighting victim. It points decidedly away from a static, single point of impact, or a passive victim. The specific patterns and directions of the blood, meticulously analyzed by forensic experts, can also reveal the angles from which the force was applied, the precise proximity of the assailant to the victim at various points, and even confirm the type of weapon used, be it blunt force trauma, a sharp instrument, or, as suspected here, a firearm. Crucially, the extensive, almost uncontrolled nature of the spatter also strongly suggests a perpetrator who, in the immediate, adrenaline-fueled frenzy of the moment, exhibited little or no regard for concealment, cleanliness, or the meticulous tidiness that might characterize a more premeditated and cold-blooded assassination. This discernible lack of constraint in the immediate aftermath points away from a carefully planned, dispassionate assassination, hinting instead at a crime saturated with intense emotion, perhaps an uncontrolled explosion of incandescent anger, primal fear, profound desperation, or a deeply personal, overwhelming rage that utterly transcends rational thought or premeditated caution. It vividly paints a terrifying picture of primal chaos, violently and irrevocably disrupting the serene order of a home specifically designed for comfort, luxury, and the often false illusion of impenetrable safety. The precise quantification of the violence inflicted further deepened the unsettling enigma surrounding Lanny Horowitz's untimely and horrific death. It was determined that 10 shots had been fired and they could have been 2 shooters. 10 shots. This number alone, a chilling, an almost unbelievable fusillade, unarmed victim, far exceeds what is typically required or expected for a singular, immediate fatality. This overwhelming discharge of weaponry pushes the psychological bounds of even the most intensely impassioned single assailant, immediately raising profound questions for both ballistic forensic investigators and seasoned criminal psychologists. The sheer volume of gunfire speaks powerfully either to an overwhelming, almost maniacal and unrestrained rage from one intensely focused individual, driven by a profound and almost pathological need to absolutely ensure death and inflict maximum possible damage, or, more chillingly and strategically, to the concerted and coordinated effort of multiple aggressors, acting in tandem, methodically synchronizing their lethal actions. This intriguing duality in the initial investigative hypothesis, one intensely enraged and shooter versus 2 calculated, albeit possibly equally impassioned participants, opened a complex and intricate avenue of inquiry for the specialized law enforcement teams, tasked with meticulously unraveling this dark tapestry of violence. It compelled them to thoughtfully consider the possible psychological profiles of individuals acting alone, driven by a solo obsession, versus those operating in concert, perhaps fueled by shared grievances, or a more organized malevolence. Adding further intricate layers to this unfolding, multifaceted tragedy, the early narrative unequivocally revealed a classic trope often encountered in high-stakes crime, particularly within exclusive and affluent circles. The tangled, sometimes poisonous, web of deeply interpersonal relationships and long-simmering grudges. And there are plenty of suspects, all with a personal axe to grind. This human element, the labyrinthine network of personal grievances, deeply ingrained animosities, unarticulated frustrations, and profound, unresolved conflicts, immediately transforms what might otherwise appear to be a straightforward homicide into a profound, psychologically rich, and emotionally complex study of deeply flawed human nature. The victim, the wealthy businessman, Lanny Horowitz, was demonstrably not an isolated figure floating serenely above the fray. He was, in fact, a crucial nexus of complex, often volatile, and deeply interdependent relationships, each delicate thread within that intricate web inherently capable of snapping under intense and sustained pressure. His life, while outwardly gilded with success, was demonstrably complicated by profound emotional scarring, as subtly alluded to by an initial, poignant insight from one source. Among the most deeply etched resentments referenced, even if indirectly as a poignant descriptor of Lanny's own personal past, was one potentially born from a familial trauma that could have left enduring, insidious scars on his developing psyche. His dad left him to hang out to dry and also emotionally abused him. This statement, powerfully referring to Lanny's own tumultuous upbringing, crucially indicates a distressing pattern of intergenerational emotional wounding. While it explicitly refers to his father's treatment of him, it establishes a powerful psychological context, where familial relationships are fraught with abandonment and insidious psychological torment. Such emotionally hostile environments, as a criminal psychology analyst well knows, can breed deep-seated anger, pervasive trust issues, and a distinct predisposition for manipulative or conflict-driven behavior that could, in turn, have been unconsciously or consciously inflicted upon others throughout Lanny's life, echoing the patterns he experienced. Such unresolved pasts can certainly contribute significantly to complex, often maladaptive adult behaviors and strained relationships, effectively creating insidious cycles of abuse or profound resentment that ripple outwards, tragically shaping the very context in which tragedy can ultimately strike. In the immediate, chaotic aftermath of such a shocking and profoundly individuals directly impacted often desperately grapple for answers, attempting to piece together fragments of reality, frequently offering fragmented perspectives, raw and unfiltered observations, and often desperate, clumsy attempts at narrative construction. One such raw, unfiltered response, emanating from the very heart of the traumatized family, hinted at a significant romantic entanglement that clearly transgressed the sacred boundaries of marital fidelity. I turned out my father had this woman that was going lunch with her, going to dinner with her. This almost conversational disclosure, delivered with a hint of frustrated resignation, and perhaps a lifetime of suppressed grievance, immediately lays bare a common, yet profoundly destabilizing and explosive motive. Infidelity. Infidelity, a classic and perennial catalyst in countless domestic disputes, can frequently and dangerously escalate into situations turning deadly, especially when deeply intertwined with pride, substantial financial stakes, and intense emotional investment. The subsequent vehement and immediate denial, "Did you shoot your father?" "Absolutely not," speaks volumes about the intense, immediate pressure placed upon the grieving, or, more chillingly, the potentially guilty party. This knee-jerk defensive mechanism, whether deeply rooted in an honest truth, a state of profound shock, or a desperate, calculated attempt at deception, is a crucial early indicator for astute investigators, offering a preliminary and invaluable glimpse into the individual's immediate psychological resilience and their initial, often unscripted, strategy for coping with the overwhelming burden of suspicion, or, perhaps, with a terrifying self-implicating reality. Yet, as often occurs in intricate cases of deeply interpersonal violence, particularly those shrouded in decades of familial secrecy, suppressed resentments, and pervasive emotional repression, the true motivations, the deep-seated grievances that fester beneath the surface veneer of normalcy, remain profoundly obscured until a pivotal and utterly unexpected discovery brought them into the harsh, incriminating light of police scrutiny. When a hidden journal reveals the truth, a killer's motive becomes crystal clear. The unanticipated discovery of a personal diary or journal, a confidential, unsealed repository of unspoken thoughts, unarticulated anguishes, raw, uncensored emotions, meticulously documented slights, and profound, hidden resentments often serves, paradoxically, as the silent yet most eloquent witness, the most intimate and undeniable confidant of a tormented soul. Its sudden emergence unequivocally promised to unlock the true, deeply personal narrative of the crime, moving decisively beyond mere speculation and circumstantial evidence to provide a meticulously documented, chilling journey through the troubled recesses of a mind contemplating, and ultimately executing, murder. The very existence of such a document, kept in secret, often hints at an intense inner life, a profound need to process or justify, even if only to oneself, extreme emotional states. This journal, once a private and sacrosanct sanctuary for unfiltered thought and emotional outpouring, was far more than a mere collection of fleeting notes or mundane daily entries. It was a deeply personal,